In today's video, I want to share some tips and strategies about public speaking. Hello everyone, welcome back to Miss Ming's channel. This is Miss Ming, and my channel I do vlog videos, makeup videos, lifestyle videos, and study videos, and everything I'm passionate about to create a happy, healthy, beautiful lifestyle. If this content interests you, make sure you subscribe to this channel and also ring the notification bell so that you don't miss out any future content. In today's video, I want to share some tips and strategies about public speaking. So I hope these tips and strategies can be helpful for any presentation, coursework presentations, public speaking, and things like that. And these tips are the things that I learned throughout the years during my 7 years of graduate school. So I hope these tips are helpful to you. Are you ready? Let's get started. So before you prepare for any presentation or public speaking, one thing to keep in mind is that you are speaking to people. I know it's a kind of intimidating when you're speaking in front of thousands of people, and when you give a public speech, sometimes like people have stage anxiety. It's kind of intimidating, but keep in mind it's not very different when you speak to 3 people compared to when you speak to 300 people. It's really not that different. So just think about, you are speaking to people, and we speak to people every single day. If you're standing on the stage, if you had anxiety, just keep in mind that these are people just like you. These are the people just like the people you talk to every single day. So keep that in mind. It's going to calm you down, and it's going to be helpful when you're preparing for public speaking or successful presentation. Public speaking tip number 1. As I previously talked about, when you're doing presentation, you're talking to people. So I know a lot of times when we're very nervous, or if it's a very important presentation, a lot of times novice presenters, they will provide a script. And this is actually what I did when I was presenting my group work, my final project, and I think the first few academic presentations that I did in a conference. I tried to provide a script, and I tried to memorize the script, and I tried to just like recite the script. Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about this, and academic language refers to the language of... It is in some ways helpful, but when you're talking to real people, some of the speech features from natural speech, which means we need to think about intonation. We need to look at people's faces. Are people getting confused? Are you going too fast? Are you going too slow? The first tip is to think about the people that you're talking to. So sometimes people think about it's about the content that you're presenting, which is true, but it's also about the connections that you are building with your audience. So again, you're presenting to real people. Of course, you want to present awesome content, but also think about how to make your presentation or your content that's accessible and build that connection with real people. Tip number 2. In this tip, I want to talk about a mistake that I used to make, and I'm still making these mistakes from time to time. It's not so much of a mistake, but a big improvement of my own presentation, is that if you are having a PowerPoint slides to support your presentation, do not have too much text on your PowerPoint. So think about it. If you are an audience and you go to a presentation, either a professor or your peer, right? If you are presented with a paragraph on the slide, it's very overwhelming, and sometimes we get confused. Do we listen to the presenter? Do we look at the text? So again, the text on the slides are supposed to be supportive and provide visuals and bullet points and key information, not so much about getting distractive and making people to have to constantly debate, do I listen? Do I read the paragraph? So the second tip is try not to have too much text on your presentation slides. I used to do that all the time. I had the first professor pointed out, I was like, but I couldn't remember what I was gonna say. I had the second professor who's talking about it, who pointed out, and I was like, but I just need constant reminder of what I was gonna say. And the third professor was doing it, and I was like getting a little bit defensive. And then I went to my own students' presentation, and some of my students did have the entire paragraph on the slide, and that's when I realized I don't know who I pay attention to, the presentation or the slide. So the second tip is Try not to put a lot of text on your presentation slides. Try to have bullet points, try to have phrases. Short phrases and bullet points are much more impactful compared to the whole paragraph of complete sentence. The third tip is before you do your presentation, think about when we were little, right? Our teacher or our parents or our grandparents, they used to tell us stories, right? And remember the bedtime stories? Sometimes we have a book that we can look at together, and sometimes we don't have a book to look at together, but somehow we are so digged in to the story. That really speaks to public speaking and presentation. So when you are speaking in public and when we are doing our presentations, sometimes the entire group of audience is kind of intimidating and we forgot the fact that we are actually telling a story. Regardless what type of content you're presenting, you're essentially telling a story. So think about it. You don't want your audience to get, oh, this is so boring. Why did I go to this? It's going to be another 20 minutes. Oh my gosh. But when we were little, when we went into this storytelling classrooms, we were so attracted by the story. And even if the story goes on and on for 30 minutes, we are still so fascinated by the story. So try to make your presentation a storytelling experience. And some of you may ask, how do I make an academic research presentation a storytelling experience? Well, actually each academic research study is a story. First, we have the context of story. So for example, my dissertation is on comparing the computer-based writing test compared to paper-based writing test. The setting of the story is currently we have two types of writing tests. When it comes to writing, it's very different, right? So I asked my audience, have you ever thought if it's the same or different? Again, you're not just telling the story, you're also interacting with your audience by show of hands, right? And then I talk about why it is so important to look at it, and I talk about the main characters, which is the participants. I introduce my main character and I talk about the characteristics of my main character. That's basically like the storytelling. I talk about my study, so what happened in the beginning and what did I analyze it, and then what are my research questions. When I was asking the research questions, I asked my audience to guess the answer, ask the audience to interact with you without verbal interaction, and then present the results to answer the research questions. Because the audience, they were thinking about their hypotheses when they think about the research question, and they're more likely to pay attention to the results because now you get them curious. And finally, you present the results and then the discussion and the conclusion, and that concludes the story. And then you provide some sort of solution. See, academic research presentation is just like a storytelling experience, and that can connect to a lot of other speech. For example, when you do teaching, you can introduce the context and the background, and that's like the setting of the story. And the good teaching is always like a storytelling, even if it's math, science, really. It's not just so different, it's just a different story. Doing a presentation is just like telling a story, but we're not necessarily telling a story to our kids, but maybe to adults, to people who could be smarter than us, right? So, but don't panic because they're real people, they're just like the people you talk to in every single. Tip number 4. Tip number 4 is to practice your presentation. A lot of times I've seen people who wrote the script and presented to people and by memorizing the script. But now that we talked about presentation is like storytelling, right? You want to practice your presentation with real people, not like just talk about it in front of your computer. There is indeed a very big difference. And when you practice your presentation, what you could do is to ask your friend to take notes on what they think that you could improve, or you can ask the students to interrupt you anytime. Again, find friends who are harsh on you because that's how we improve. So tell them that, don't tell me I did a good job. Tell me where I didn't do the best job. And if they felt like, oh, we didn't specify this, or you were speaking too fast, or you were a little bit too neat, then you need to speak a little bit louder. So again, practice your presentation is so important. The reason for practice is not for us to memorize the script, it is more about getting feedback. So I really encourage you to present your presentation or public speaking with multiple different types of audience and ask them for very harsh feedback. And you don't necessarily have to get there, like really implement their feedback. If you don't feel like it's a legit feedback, you can think about it, but always ask them to provide you with a lot of harsh feedback. It's going to be helpful in terms of improve your presentation. Tip Tip number 5. Previously, we talked about not to have too much text in the slides or whatever visuals you have to complement your presentation. So now that we talk about not have too much text, then how much amount of text are considered acceptable and what should be on the presentation slides to support us? The first important thing to keep in mind is that bullet point and phrases is going to be helpful than complete sentences and paragraphs. So bullet points, bullet points, bullet points. So instead of putting a paragraph talking about English language learners, you can put English language learners attend to, and then you put some bullet points. And then do not put a complete sentence, maybe put some like keywords, and also you can bold some keywords, and that's going to be very helpful. The second thing that I encourage you to put on the slide is visuals. Visuals could be very helpful or distracting. The first thing is, if you have a presentation, think about your color scheme. I know it goes a little bit weird that we're talking about graphic design suddenly, but if you have a presentation, the color of the text are in red, blue, green, yellow, brown, it's going to be very weird. So what you could do is to decide the scheme, the color scheme of the entire presentation. You can do it in orange and blue, you can do it in orange and purple, you can do it in red and blue. So just have 2 colors are going to be helpful. And sometimes instead of like changing the colors, you could bold the text or bold the keywords so that like when the audience look at your slide, they immediately pay attention to the keywords. In terms of visuals, if visuals are not helpful, then they could be distracting. What it means that instead of having like super colorful background, maybe think about like some plain professional background. And by visuals, you can put some pictures that are free of copyright. So what you could do is that you go to Google Image and there is a option that says tool. In terms of tool, you can put that labeled for reuse, and in that case you can see that which are the pictures that are free of copyrights. To me, I really love the pictures offered by Pixabay. I personally use a lot of pictures from their site. Then the copyright-free pictures, you can also put tables, charts, and diagrams and graphs. So in Microsoft, you can easily create graphs like that, but when we are creating the graphs, think about the color scheme. Graphs could be confusing or they could be very helpful. So what you could do is to present your diagram or your graph to someone who is not in your field. If they can kind of get the key information, that means it's a successful graph. And but if they are like, I'm so confused, does it mean this or does it mean this? Then maybe you need to work on it. Tip number 6. So tip number 6, speak with confidence. I know confidence does not build within one day. You cannot just be like a very insecure person and suddenly go on stage and become very confident. But if you do enough research about the topic you're going to talk about, you will speak with higher confidence. And also the tone of your presentation is going to be very important. You need to show the audience that you know what you are presenting. If you're presenting academic research or final project or a literature or reading, it's a reading presentation, or if you're doing public speaking, sharing your personal experience, you need to have that confidence that you may not be presenting whatever is the most information out there, but you're presenting whatever the most that you know, and you need to have that confidence in your presentation. If somebody asks you a harsh question, you can just smile at that person and say, well, that is a great question and I will get back to you later. Or it's okay. It's okay that you can't answer a question immediately, but you need to have the confidence to say that, yes, your question is well received. I have the confidence that I can get back to you later. Yeah. Number 7. What if you made mistakes during presentation? I've seen a lot of students of mine, they panic, or even some peers of mine, they start to panic when they start to make mistakes in a presentation. And everybody makes mistakes. In a perfect world that you practice do presentation like 30 times, maybe you will not make mistakes. But sometimes when we go on the stage, when we stare at like thousands, hundreds and thousands of people, we get scared a little bit. But that is okay. When you make a mistake, you can just laugh at yourself, have some humor. And if you just notice there was an error on the slide when you're presenting to your main audience, just skip it. Like, don't draw attention to your error. Ideally, you won't have an error, but don't draw any attention to it. So just keep on going, pretend it wasn't there, and just keep on going. Yeah. Tip number 8. is to think about your intonation, your pauses. Public speaking, although very similar to speaking to real life people, is still a little bit different. If you in real life you speak really fast, you may try to think about what are the times you want to make pauses. So one thing that I want you to think about is that if you are listening to public speakers, audiobook or things like that, there is information that we pay attention to, usually the content words. So when you're thinking about that, you need to think about how you strategically can make pauses. And this is very powerful in terms of how your audience is processing the information. So this is the key information, and I want to change my intonation right here and make pauses right here. So again, I make pauses, I emphasize right here, and people are more likely to pay attention and people are more likely to process, oh, this is the key information. Think about it like you need to kind of speak in a way that people are, oh, it's right here, I need to listen. I need to listen. Oh, that is so correct. You need to give them time to really reflect on what you just said and prepare for the future information. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to speak drastic slow to draw everybody fall asleep, but it just means that you may want to take pauses on places that's kind of not similar to normal speech. The next tip, when you're presenting the content, I want you to think about what is the most important content. I was struggling with this when I first started my PhD career. I didn't know which are the most important content. I was trying to present all of the information I know, and somehow I ran out of time. And then I learned my lesson. It's better that you give people 3 key things compared to 10 things that go over really fast. In that case, you need to determine what are the important things to talk about and what are not the important things to talk about. And you can also provide contact information or future materials or online materials that people can go to if they want to have access to the content that you didn't have time to go over. It's always great to have enough time to be on a regular pace on 3 key things than going over 10 things and nobody retained any information of the 10 things. So determining what are the important points in your presentation or public speech is very important, and present it in a very accessible and connectable way in a storytelling fashion is also very important. Tip number 9. Usually when we do presentation or public speaking, we usually have a time limit. I know, don't you hate the time limit? But please respect the time limit. This basically applies to all types of public speech and presentation. Unless you're a rock star and we want you to continue sing for us, that's a different story. You're providing a performance. But please respect time. When you are practicing a presentation, if your presentation is about 45 minutes, maybe try to limit your presentation to 43 minutes. So I'll give you an example. For my dissertation study, my time limit is between 30 to 45 minutes. So I practice my presentation like 30 to 50 times, and each time I spend about 42 to 43 minutes. So I felt pretty good about staying within the time limit. But on the day of my presentation, first we had people who dropped in a little bit late. So we started a little bit late. And also we had people who had no backgrounds in terms of the topic that I was talking about. So I need to further explain. And then instead of 43 minutes, the presentation went over and I finished it within 48 minutes. Again, there was like a 3-minute, you know, a little bit over time. It's not a big deal in terms of this particular type of presentation. But if you are presenting in a conference or if you're doing public speaking somewhere else in a school, for example, people expect you to finish in time. So now I learned if you have 45-minute time limit, maybe just prepare a speech that can finish within 40 minutes. If you have 30-minute limit, prepare a speech that can finish 28 minutes. And sometimes in the final project when we do presentations, that's like 15 to 20 minutes, try to have 2-minute buffer time because sometimes we may have to explain furthermore. So just try to have that 2 to 5-minute buffer time is going to be helpful, and make sure that you're not going over time. It's not respectful to other people's time. Yes. The last one I want to talk about is make sure that you're speaking to people and make sure you're not reading aloud any script or slides. One thing everybody hates is to have someone stand in front of the presentation slide and then read over each word on the slide. Make sure that you are not reading word by word in your presentation slides. or word by word in your little script manual. So think about it. Actually, this happened in real life. Think about it. If I'm doing my video, I'm not looking at the lens. I'm just looking at my little draft. This is not my little draft, but okay. Public speaking is very important because you use it for school, you use it in your job. Sometimes we get panicked, sometimes we don't know how can improve public speaking skills. But most of the times in schools, students, they do not feel prepared because usually their written papers are graded and provided feedback versus public speaking skills. Usually they receive a grade but no extensive feedback in terms of how to improve. If I'm doing my video like this, are you gonna subscribe? Of course not. Oh, please subscribe, by the way. So that proves my point. So when you're doing your presentation, make sure that you're not reading over anything. So if you have a script, that is okay, but try to do it like this. Hello everyone, today I want to talk about public speaking. Today I want to share 11 tips about public speaking. The first tip is blah 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 blah, and then the second tip is blah 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 blah, and then third tip is blah 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 blah. So if you have a script or bullet points, don't read over it, but maybe you can take a look at it and then look at your audience. Eye contact is so important. And also, if you are reading aloud, just like the words on the slide, then why do I need you to read over it? I can read over it myself. So make sure you're providing descriptions and explanations of the bullet points that are presented in the slides so that your speech is complementary with the slides. Try to have eye contact. Again, that goes to my tip number 1 is you're talking to real people. You're building connections with real people and you want to build that connection. Think about it. If you go into a store and you talk to the person, you're doing like, hey, can I have this and this and this and that? People are gonna think that you're rude. The same rule goes to public speaking. So do this and look at your audience so that you can build that connections not verbally but also with your emotions, your eye contact, your body language. So everything just goes together when you build that connection with your audience. Alrighty, that's it for today. I hope the tips and strategies I talk about in this video are helpful to you. If other tips that I didn't talk about, make sure you share in the comment area so we can share all of the things that are helpful for self-improvement. Alright, that's it for today. Before you go, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you find it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And also please subscribe to my channel and ring the notification bell and comment down below what are the strategies and tips that you use for public speaking and presentation. What's your favorite video content in this channel that you'd like to watch? Alright, that's it for today. Thumbs up and subscribe. I will see you in my next video. Bye!